Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our town hall for notaries public and those who would like to be a notary, and all those who are interested. My name is Kathy Smith, and I'm honored to be Maryland's Assistant Secretary of State. I provide executive oversight to the Charities and Legal Services Division, and I bring greetings to each of you from Maryland Secretary of State Susan Lee, who would have liked to have been here to welcome you personally today, but is unavailable. The topic for today's Notary Public Town Hall is, so you want to be a Maryland Notary Public? During this morning's town hall, we'll address the requirements and qualifications to become a Notary Public, the commissioning, enforcement, public information, notary stamping device, the journal, and allowable fees. As indicated in the email notification about today's town hall, this town hall will be recorded, and a link to the recording will be made available on the Office of the Secretary of State's website under the Notaries tab. By choosing to join the town hall, you are consenting to the recording as a part of the town hall. The content and presentation provided is for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be legal advice. With me today is our Division Administrator, Michael Schlein, and the Secretary of State's notary officers. Please know the platform restricts attendance, not the Office of the Secretary of State. And in response to some emails that were received, attendance is not required. Also, the town hall is not the course of study or substitute for the course of study required by the October 2021 notary law. This town hall is an outreach to educate Maryland's notaries public and those interested. Time is reserved at the end for questions. You may find that your questions are answered as the presentation progresses, so you may want to hold off on asking them. You may also place questions in the chat box, but in order to prevent confusion about the source of the response, please do not answer questions placed in the chat box. I'm going to repeat that. In order to prevent confusion about the source of the response, please, participants are asked not to respond to questions in the chat box. If you have questions about the title insurance producers and independent contractors, or TIPIC, please hold them. We'll be holding a town hall on February 21st with our colleagues from the Maryland Insurance Administration, and they will be able to answer any questions you have specifically to TIPIC at that time. That is within the scope of their authority, not the Office of the Secretary of State. Our notary officers will announce questions that are placed in the chat box at the end of our session. We'll do our best to answer all of them, and of course, we'll invite questions during the Q&A session. Again, a recording of today's town hall will be posted on the SOS's website under the Notaries tab. And finally, the content and presentation provided today is for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be legal advice. As we begin, if you'd like to keep your camera on, you're welcome to do so. But please mute your microphone. Let me say that again. Please mute your microphones. We can hear everything that happens when your microphones are on. So please mute them. Without further ado, allow me to introduce to you our fabulous Division Administrator, Michael Schlein. Mike?
Thanks, Kathy. How's everybody doing today? Hope everybody's doing great. Welcome to our first Notary Town Hall of 2023. So you want to be a Maryland Notary Public. So Kathy said we're going to cover certain items here. This is our agenda for today's town hall. We're going to go over the requirements in detail, talk about qualifying and commissioning, different enforcement, how that works, public information, and some of the things you're definitely going to want to know before becoming a notary, like getting your notary stamping device, having a journal, and of course, the fees you're allowed to charge when you're a notary public. Source is a legal authority, so stuff in the law, in the regulations, and the Constitution about being a notary, a little bit in the Constitution, a lot in the Annotated Code of Maryland, which is the laws of the state of Maryland, Title 18, subtitles 1 and 2, in the Code of Maryland Regulations 010208, point 01 through 17. So if anybody's looking for where all this stuff is derived from, that is where it's coming from. So there's a requirement to qualify to be a notary public, and you can apply and renew online at that link right there. And as part of your application, you're going to have photo ID showing proof of residence, or at least proof of where you live. If you're not a Maryland resident, what else is needed to apply? So you're going to complete that application. You're going to attach a copy of your license or non-driver ID card, and there's a payment to apply, application fee that is paid to the Secretary of State as part of the online registration. And for that license or similar ID, what's important about that is it's something that verifies the home address you're providing on your application. So for the purpose of applying to become a notary public, if you're attaching your ID, make it your state-issued driver's license or non-driver's ID card, something from the government that verifies your current address. If the address on your photo ID does not match your current address, please be sure to attach your change of address card. If you're a Maryland resident, you get that change of address card from the Motor Vehicle Administration. So if the address on your ID is no longer the current address, be sure to attach an MVA change of address card so we can verify you are who you are and you live where you live. So different qualifications to be a notary public. So under the law, it requires you to be at least 18 years of age, good moral character and integrity, and requires you to be a resident of or employed or have a practice in the state of Maryland. So if you're living in Maryland, you're going to be a resident of the senatorial district from which you're appointed. So on a new application, you will have to list out what legislative district you reside in, who your state senator is. That helps with the workflow of a new applicant as part of their process to become a notary and get approved. If you reside outside of the state of Maryland, you have to be a resident of a state that allows Maryland residents working in that state to serve as a notary in that state as well. As far as I remember and recall and know, all of our neighbor states there allow the same. So working, say you live in Virginia as an example, and you work in Maryland, you could apply to be a notary because maybe you're a resident of a different state, but you work in the state of Maryland, so you would have an employment or a place of practice in the state. And when you become a notary, your commission lasts 4 years. At the end of those 4 years, you get to renew your commission if you like, and you can renew up to 60 days prior to your expiration date and up to 30 days after your expiration date. If you don't renew and you let your commission expire and it's expired for more than 30 days, the next time you reapply, you'll reapply as a new applicant. And then effective October 1st, 2021, an initial applicant must complete a course of study and pass an examination offered by the Secretary of State, or there's a list of course providers on our website, and a renewing applicant has to complete a course of study, though do not have to pass an examination. So the list of providers for a course and exam are listed on our website. They are independent or private companies. It's not the Secretary of State's office. These providers have met the requirements to be authorized to provide the class and the exam to new and renewing notaries public. A lot has changed in the law in the last 2.5 years. So a lot of new stuff. If you've been a notary a long time and you haven't kept up, be sure to check out, either the handbook that you can purchase online from us, or when you take the class, there'll be a lot of new information for you to consume and learn.
So Mike, just to go back for half a second to the residency requirements. So if I live in Pennsylvania, for example, but I am a realtor or a banker and I work in Maryland, I am eligible to apply because I work in the state of Maryland, although I live in a different state. Is that correct?
Correct.
And if I change jobs and I live in Pennsylvania and now working and living in Pennsylvania instead of working in Maryland, I'm no longer eligible to be a notary public in Maryland because my place of employment has changed. Is that correct also?
Correct. If that situation were to happen and you were to try, say you were a notary and you want to renew, and you were a notary previously because you maybe didn't live in Maryland but worked in Maryland. Now, if you renewed and you no longer live or work in Maryland, that application, whether it was a renewal or a new, would be denied because you don't meet the qualifications to become a notary.
Thanks for clarifying, Mike.
Good question. So
Can I ask a follow-up question on that, please?
I'm sorry, we'll be holding all questions until the end. Thank you. Please record it. Thank you.
Really?
Notary public is an officer of the state of Maryland, so they receive a commission to become a notary public for the state of Maryland. Notaries must take the oath of office at the clerk of the circuit court in the county in which they're authorized, or if in Baltimore City, to receive the commission prior to performing notarial acts. You have to go to the clerk of the court and receive that commission before you are a notary. If you get your application approved, that does not make you a notary. That means you've been approved to go get your commission, take the oath of office. You have to take the oath of office at the clerk of the circuit court in order to officially be a notary and be allowed to perform notarial acts.
So in other words, I can't notarize a document if I'm a notary public until and unless I actually am commissioned by the clerk of the court.
Correct. In fact, you're not even a notary public until you're commissioned by the clerk of the circuit court. Been approved to be one, but you're not actually one until you've taken that oath of office.
Yeah. And that's important because a notary is a public officer. And so having that commission is an official process and needs to be documented by the clerk. So great points, Mike. Thank you.
So applicants are notified by email regarding the determination of their application. So if you're approved, you're going to get an email from us that says your application's been approved, and it's going to give you instructions and information on how to appear before the clerk of the circuit court to be sworn in and receive your commission. So you want to be looking out for that email if you submit an application. If you're a renewal, 2-3 days tops, you should have that email from us saying you've been almost always approved, but something approved or denied. A determination's been made. Hopefully it's an approved determination. So if it's a renewal, don't wait too long. If you don't see that email within a week, make sure you're in touch with us to follow up. You want to make sure you're looking out for that email. And a little later on the slide, tell you exactly why you want to be on the lookout. For new applicants, it can take a little longer, but if you're a new applicant and you don't hear anything within 2 or 3 weeks, check in with us. Make sure it's still in process. Make sure you haven't missed the approval email as well. All right, we know we send the emails. We know our system sends the emails, but we know it's sent. Whether or not it makes it to your inbox or your spam folder sometimes is a different story. So if you're not seeing that email saying you've been approved, make sure you're in touch with us. Don't wait too long. Worst thing you can do is wait several months to check in. By then it might be too late, and that's because of the following. So the clerk of the court is based on the notary's residence. If you live in, say, Baltimore City, your commission is going to go to the Baltimore City clerk of the court. If you live in Cecil County, it's going to go to the Cecil County clerk of the court. If you live out of state but work in state, it's generally going to go to the courthouse that the county in which you work, since you're an out-of-state resident, although it doesn't necessarily have to. So make sure you know what county clerk of the court you're going to, which one you select on your application. There is a fee to get sworn in when you're there, $11, not to be confused with the $11 you're paying online when you file an application with us. And the reason you don't want to sit around and wait too long if on that application is the notary must be sworn in within 30 days of the issue date of that commission. 30 days. And that's in super big font and bolded for that very reason. And I was just talking about how you don't want to sit and wait. If you're a renewal and you haven't seen that approval email within a few days, check in. Check in with us. Shoot us an email, give us a call, check the status of that. If you're a new applicant, don't wait more than 2 or 3 weeks to check in if you haven't heard anything about being approved. And this is exactly why we say to do that 30 days after we issue that commission. So when we issue that commission, that email goes to your email address, the one provided on your online application. So make sure when you're providing us your information online, it's correct. Make sure your email doesn't have any typos in it, because it's going to the email address that you tell us to send it to. So make sure it's also one you use. If you don't see that email, this is why I say check in with us within those allotted time frames or recommended time frames. Because if you check in, within a few weeks of your new application, you can't miss the 30-day window, right? Say you got approved in a week, and you're checking in 2 or 3 weeks after you filed, you still got a couple more weeks to go down there and get sworn in. If you let it ride 6 months before you check in, it may have already been approved, issued, been at the courthouse for 30 days, not picked up by you, and it's revoked. So make sure you're checking in, make sure you're proactive. If you don't see that approval email within a couple of weeks, please be checking in with us. Much easier to check in and catch it on the front end, and much better to do that than to wait several months and be told you have to reapply because you missed that email. And check your inbox, but also check your spam folder as well. Sometimes people's spam filters will throw it in there thinking it's a spam email, a junk email, rather than a good email. So please check both. Don't miss it. And if you do miss it or don't see it, check in with us in advance. Be proactive. Don't sit around and wait and wait and wait and wait. And the issue date is the same day as the approval email. So the day you get that email is the day that you've been approved. That's the issue date of your commission. So 30 days from that date to get sworn in. So on the enforcement side, can I have a commission revoked or suspended? Yes, that's possible. You become a notary, or you get approved. You could end up getting that commission revoked or suspended for failing to follow the laws or the regulations or other requirements of being a notary public. The Secretary of State, if her investigation determines there's a cause to revoke a notary's commission, the notary will get a notification of our intent to remove the notary, and the notary can contest that removal, request a hearing held by the Secretary of State or their designee. These hearings are informal. You're not going to a court or before a judge. It's a informal agency hearing. It's essentially the notary's chance to explain to us why, they think they should not be removed or revoked, removed from office, have their commission revoked by the Secretary of State. One of probably the biggest reason a commission gets revoked, it's before you even become a notary. It's for failing to get sworn in. We just talked about on that last slide, making sure you're there within 30 days. I bet you that's by far the number one reason a commission gets revoked is for failure to appear at the clerk of the circuit court. Take that oath of office within 30 days of issuance. So make sure you get there within 30 days, because that's not something that you could have a hearing on. You're not a notary. You're not getting removed from office. The commission will just be getting revoked because you didn't have time.
And Mike, it might be worth mentioning, I know you mentioned checking spam folder, but it may be worth mentioning it's 30 days from the day the email was sent. So if it's if you didn't check spam and it's been in the spam folder for a week, the clock began the day it was sent, not the day you found it in your spam folder. So please pay attention to the 30 days. That's really critical. And we want to help you succeed. That's why we have these town halls. That's why we're asking you to check your spam folder. That's why we're asking you to make sure you get to the clerk's office so that you can get commissioned and start working as a notary or performing your notarial acts.
Yep. Yeah, and just sliding back to that last page where we just talked about it, that last bullet point, issue date's the same date as the approval email. And like Kathy said, it's the date we sent it, not the date that you realized you had it. So make sure you're on the lookout and make sure you're checking in if you don't see it. So publishing information about notaries public. Will a notary public's information be published by the Secretary of State? So yes, business phone number for each notary is provided on the Secretary of State's webpage. Searches for a notary on Secretary of State is allowed. You can search for notaries that are commissioned by name, first name, last name. The following information is going to show up there when a search result is found. This name, county of commission, expiration date, business phone, applicant ID number. So this general info is showing up on our website if you're a notary public and somebody searches for you. There's not a long listing per se where you can just scroll like a phone book type of thing. But if you're searching for a notary public, or you are a notary public and somebody searches for you, this is what they're going to find on our website. Home addresses and phone numbers are not going to be displayed on the website. The Secretary of State also publishes a list of notaries public authorized to perform remote notarizations. The list is updated regularly as we get new remote notaries. We'll update the list on our website. So there is the notary search page where you could just search for notaries in general, people that are commissioned as a notary public. And then there's also a list that we post of anybody authorized to perform remote notarial acts. And real quick, too, talking about public information before we move forward, a notary's work address and work phone number are both public information. So make sure we have updated work address and work phone number. I think that's important. If we do not have a work address and work phone number, the notary's home address and home phone number are public information. They won't be displayed on the website, but if somebody were to request a notary's address, the default is to give the business address. That is public information. However, if there's not one provided by the notary, or the notary does not maintain a current work address, that home address would ultimately be what is public information. So this is a review so far of all this information. Need to be 18 years old to be a notary public. Must either reside or work in the state of Maryland. So by work in, we mean have a place of employment or practice in the state of Maryland. You need to have that before you become a notary. You have to have that. If you reside in Maryland, great, you reside in Maryland, you can become a notary. But if you work in Maryland but live out of state, so you don't reside in Maryland but you do work in Maryland, you need to work in Maryland in order to apply and qualify to become a notary public. So you have to have the place of employment or practice prior to the point in time where you're applying with us. I think that's an important point to make. We do get questions about that every now and then. Notaries public are officers of the state of Maryland. You must take that oath of office in order to officially become a notary public and get that commission. That commission can be revoked or suspended for failing to follow the law, the regs, and other requirements. And it can also get revoked if the notary fails to get sworn in at the clerk of the court within the 30 days of issuance. And certain information about a notary public can be found on our website by searching for the notary's name, and certain other information, namely the work address, is also public information. However, again, if you don't have a work address or work phone number, then the home address or home phone number would become the public information available for the notary. But again, not putting any home address or phone number on our website. So just preparing to apply, processing time, so things we want to know as we're applying, what's happening. So one thing you want to do before you become a notary is, this sounds so obvious, but become familiar with and understand the notary handbook. What am I doing when I'm becoming a notary? Why am I becoming a notary? What will I be doing as a notary? Very important to know that. The required course of study, it's going to help with that, right? It's going to help with that. But if I'm applying to be something, I want to know what it is I'm doing before I even take the course or go through the process. There's a bunch of resources here available that applicants should know. And if you don't have all these links written down before we move pages, don't worry. Like Kathy said at the beginning, this is going to get posted on our website, the recording. So these slides will be available. And all of these pages can be found from visiting sos.maryland.gov. So if you're on sos.maryland.gov, you can scroll to the notary page and find all these specific links. Or if you're on sos.maryland.gov, you can even go to that Division of State Documents link where you can search regulations. So all this can be found through our website, all these links. sos.maryland.gov being the home page for the Secretary of State's office. For notary security, other thing to think about is the application is time limited. If an applicant is inactive for 30 minutes, the application is, you're logged out, the application goes away, the information is lost. So make sure you have all the information you need to have beforehand, have that certificate of completion for the course. And if needed, if you're a new applicant, the certificate of passing the exam. Have a PDF of that ID saved so you can attach it. If you're a new applicant, make sure you have that reference information, right? Have that information in advance. Legislative district where the applicant resides is needed. We mentioned that earlier. You're going to be asked to put your legislative district and state senator on the application. That mdelect.net can actually tell you who that is. If you punch in your address information on mdelect.net, the results are going to come back and tell you what state legislative district you live in, who your state senator is. And again, we're looking for state senator, state senatorial legislative district. We don't need to know who the person in the House of Representatives is at the federal level. We want your state legislative district and state senator. So gathering some information, we started talking about a little of all this already. References. Need to have references if you're a new notary applicant. You must provide this information: name, address, phone number, current email address for all those references. Have that information before you start that application so you don't get timed out if you don't have it. Digital image of the applicant's driver's license or valid government ID. That's verifying the applicant's home address. You're going to be uploading that as part of your application. And as mentioned earlier, that MVA change of address card, if that ID is different. Passport's not acceptable as part of your notary application. And what I mean by that is when you send your application to us, don't attach your passport to be your valid ID. And that's because your passport doesn't give your address. So we can't verify that you are reside where you say you reside at your home address. And that's important because we need to know where we're going to commission you. And that determines a lot of stuff as being a notary. So also the $9 application fee, $2 convenience fee. You can pay by credit card, e-check, PayPal, online, and have your certificate of completion for the course of study if you're a new or renewing applicant. And if you're a new applicant, also have the certificate of passing of the exam. It's going to ask you for both as part of the application process. So after you've completed the application online, what's going to happen next? We're going to get that application. It's going to show up in our system the next business day. So if you did it today, we would know that you did it and have it tomorrow morning. We're going to check background. So if you have ever been convicted of a crime and the answer is yes, be sure to select yes and explain. If you select yes, there will be a space that appears that allows you to explain whatever that conviction was and anything you want us to know about it. And if you've ever had a civil judgment, the same thing. Civil judgment, what do I mean? Maybe you've been sued over something and a judgment's been entered against you, civil, not criminal case, and judgment's been found. If the answer is yes, be sure to check yes and explain. And like I said, anything you want to explain about that, let us know in that field that appears. If you check no, because you've never been convicted of a crime or a civil judgment, you're not going to have to provide an answer for anything. If you do check yes, because the answer is yes, you will get an opportunity to explain what that conviction was or what that civil judgment was, and like I said, any other details we should know as part of reviewing your application. The most important thing I can say with regards to background checks is if you've ever been convicted of a crime and the answer should be yes, just answer yes and explain. Disclose and explain. An easy way to get denied is to provide false information on your notary application. So if you've been convicted of a crime and you answer no and we find that out, probably going to get denied, right? Because you provided false information on an application. So be sure if the answer is yes, you check yes. Right, you might still get denied. It's possible, but it's also possible that you'll still get approved, especially depending on many factors, what the crime conviction is, how long ago it was, what impact does it have on you being a notary, things like that. But if you check no and the answer should be yes, that's going to be an issue. Notary is supposed to be.
Yeah, that's falsifying a document. So
Right.
that's why that's problematic,
Yep.
right? So
Yep.
just tell the truth. That's a simple case.
Yeah, I drive that point home, folks, where, should I even apply, or should I check yes? Yes, of course. If the answer is yes, check yes. Filed an application. One of the qualifications to be a notary is good moral character and integrity. Lying on that application to become a notary doesn't really display that. Reference checks or review by senator. So this is new applications only. In Maryland, the state senator in the district in which you reside reviews notary applications. There is a section of law that allows them to opt out of that and delegate that authority to us at the Secretary of State's office. Most senators do delegate that authority to us. Some still retain that and make the determinations. So if your senator is opted out of the process, the Secretary of State's office is going to contact your references, and they're going to get that reference request by email at the email address you provided for those references. And if the applicant senator participates in that approval process, we're going to send your application to your state senator, who will review that application and make the determination. And they'll handle any reference contacting or decision making on that. So just make sure that reference info is good, because we're going to contact it if it's an opt-out senator. And if your senator reviews and opts into the process, then they're probably going to be contacting at least one of those references. So make sure that's good contact info, whether it's by phone or email or both. Make sure that contact info is good. And after references responded or the senator reviews it, a determination is made to either approve or deny that application. If approved, that commission's going to the clerk of the circuit court so that you can get there, get sworn in, and receive your commission, remembering that you're going to do that within 30 days from the date of the approval email being sent. And if denied, the applicant's going to be notified of the denial of their application. The timeline. So if it's an opt-out senator for a new application, very similar to renewals, 2-3 days tops. The only reason a new application that the Secretary of State's office reviews takes longer is usually that a reference hasn't responded, or we have a question about your application. We've reached out to you by email but haven't heard anything back yet. So new applications that the Secretary of State has delegated the authority to review, 2-3 days, just like a renewal. And for new applications where the senator holds that discretion and decision making on the application, it's entirely up to that state senator's office when they make the determination. So could be a short amount of time, could be a little longer, but this is where I go back to, if you filed a new application and you haven't heard anything in 2 or 3 weeks, please check back in with us. Make sure you haven't missed that email approving you. You might get told, oh, hey, it's at your senator's office. We haven't heard back yet. But better to be proactive, right, than it is to forget about it and hope you hear something later. You can also check the status of your notary application using this link. Then you'll click check status of submitted application, punch in your info there, and be able to check the status of where it is in the process. So again, reviewing kind of the application process, gather everything before you start, right? Have all your information available and ready to complete that application successfully the first time around when you get on there. And make sure you're familiar with the laws, regs, everything about being a notary. That required education is going to help a lot. New notaries are going to have to pass that test, and that's going to help a lot. But read, be aware. Be aware, be aware, be aware. Applicants are automatically logged out of the system after 30 minutes of inactivity. If you're inactive for 30 minutes, that information you started to put on that application is going to be lost. All the more reason to make sure you have everything you need before you start that application. And applicants must disclose if they've ever been convicted of a crime or had a civil judgment against them. Again, if the answer is yes, just select yes and explain what was the conviction and anything else we need to know about that. Family members and employers may not be used when providing the 3 required references. Photo ID must contain the applicant's address. The applicant moved. The MVA change of address card indicating the current address must accompany that application. You must be sworn in within 30 days of the date that commission's issued. So be looking out for that email. Again, that email date that is sent is the date the commission was issued. 30 days from that date. $11 on your application to us, but also $11 when you go to the clerk of the circuit court to get sworn in. And that $11 at the clerk of the court is going to be payable to the clerk, not to us. So you become a notary public. There are certain things you're going to need to have and certain things you're going to definitely need to know. Notary stamping device, journal, and fees we're going to cover here in this section. So property of and responsibility for the notary stamping device. The notary must get their own stamping device. For folks that have been a notary a long time, they probably remember it as the notary seal. At their own expense, the stamping device is a public seal. It is the property of the notary. Even if the notary's employer purchases that stamping device is the property of the notary, not the employer. And if the notary leaves the employer, the notary must take that stamping device with them. It is your notary stamping device or your notary seal. It has your name on it. It is not your employer's. It is yours. It has your name on it, and you're the one that bears responsibility for safekeeping of that notary seal. Don't leave it. If you leave companies, don't leave it. Take it with you. Plenty of horror stories of where that's happened, and that notary seal ends up getting used on all kinds of stuff after you're gone. Don't put yourself in that position because it's your name on it, right? So who they're calling first is going to be the notary.
This is a really important point to strike home again, because the notary is the one who's actually commissioned. The employer is not commissioned. The notary is the one who is the public officer, not the employer. So if an employer says, sorry, Charlie, you're leaving us, you got this other great job at somewhere else, we keep your notary journal, we keep your stamp. The answer is no, sir, no, ma'am. It belongs to me as a notary. That is what the law says. And so, don't be afraid to push back. If you encounter that kind of situation, you may refer the employer in a situation where they really are very adamant to our office, and we will, advise them the same as we are today. So never, ever leave your notary journal, your stamp, or any of the materials related to your notary commission with an employer when you're leaving their employment.
Yep, and notary is responsible for securing that stamping device. So make sure it goes with you if you leave for good. And also never allow another individual to use that stamping device. Never, ever, 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 ever allow another individual to use that stamping device. We got creative on that font size, right? Larger, all uppercase, bolded. Never let somebody else use that stamping device. Never even allow it to accidentally be used. So we get stories of folks sometimes that left it out on their desk. Oh, I trust my coworker, and nope, put it away.
That's why it's important to secure it and keep it in a secure space all the time. And if an employer requires that you be a notary as a part of your job, that's fine, but it's still the individual who is the notary, not the employer, which is why you retain the stamping device in the journal and you never leave it behind.
Right, and never allow anybody else to use it. They're not the notary. You are the notary. The stamping device, what else about the stamping device other than it's yours and you keep it safely and securely? Stamping device must be capable of being copied with the record to which it is affixed or attached or logically associated. Stamping device, it can be an embosser, so the with the raised impression on the paper, or it could be the rubber stamp with the ink impression. Both are used in Maryland. Both are in common use. The embosser makes the raised impression, and the rubber stamp with the ink, the one that makes the ink impression. So if the device is lost or stolen, promptly notify the Secretary of State when it's discovered missing. Let us know that your stamping device was lost or stolen. Let us know when that happened so that we can make sure we note your record so that we know this happened and we can be aware of that situation. So let us know if it's lost or stolen, especially, we want to know that in advance, right? What happens if it starts popping up in use elsewhere? We know in advance that it was stolen or lost, and, we can be aware of that. So if your commission's resigned, revoked, or expired, regardless of resignation, revocation, or expiration of the notary's commission, the notary must disable the stamping device by destroying, defacing, damaging, erasing, or securing it against use in a manner that renders it unusable. So make sure that seal cannot be used, that stamping device cannot be used after you're no longer a notary. If your commission expires and you're not going to renew, you're done, destroy that seal. Revoke.
And this is worth saying again. I don't know how many times we should say it, but the commission is assigned to the individual notary. It is not assigned to the company for which the notary works. So if you leave employment, you take the device, the journal, all the materials with you, you disable them. They do not belong to the company. Someone else in the company may not, under any circumstances, may not use the device to notarize a document or documents, whether you're still employed there or after your employment expires. So just remember that. Folks have gotten themselves in hot water because they failed to do that. We want to make sure you don't find yourselves in a pickle.
Right, exactly. Notary stamping device, it must contain the following 3 pieces of information. The name of the notary public as it appears on the notary's commission. So when you go to the clerk of the circuit court, you get sworn in, you receive that notary commission. The name on that commission is the name that should appear on your stamping device. And one little important tip or tool for this, when we send you the email that says you've been approved or your commission's been issued, it's going to have the name as it's going to appear on your notary commission. So when you look at that email, if that name's wrong, let us know before you go get sworn in, right? Let us know in advance so we can fix it and send another commission over there. The name on that commission is the name that should appear on your notary public seal. In addition to that, the words notary public must appear, and the county in which the notary resides or was qualified must appear, or if they were sworn in Baltimore City, it should say City of Baltimore or Baltimore City on their notary public seal. So let's say, for example, I become a notary and my commission name is Michael Schlein. My notary public seal should say Michael Schlein, notary public, and then it should have the county in which I was sworn in. This should say I work here in Annapolis, just to say it was Annapolis. Although again, if you live in Maryland, it's where you reside, not where you work. So my notary seal would say Michael Schlein, notary public, Anne Arundel County. Or if I reside in Garrett County, it would say Michael Schlein, notary public, Garrett County. Whatever county in which I'm taking that oath of office and receiving my commission, that's the county which should be on your notary public stamping device. And effective October 1st, 2020, the notary seal will be required to contain the notary's expiration date unless the notary's expiration date appears in the notarial certificate. Before that sets off any alarm bells for anybody, one of our town halls later this year will be about types of notarial acts and notarial certificates. And we had one last year, and that recording is on our website. But one of the things you'll learn about notarial certificates is that it should include the notary's expiration date in the certificate. So if you're doing a notarial act correctly and it has the correct certificate, your expiration date is listed in the notarial certificate, which means it would not have to be a part of your notary seal. So notary journal. What's a journal? What's going on here? What is a notary journal? Notary is required by law to maintain a journal. Used to be known for notaries that have been around a while, the Fair Register of Official Acts. The journal chronicles all notarial acts performed by the notary public. If the notary notarizes for the same people regularly, the notary must still enter each individual notarization into the notary's journal. And those entries in that journal shall be made contemporaneously with the performance of each notarial act, contemporaneously, right, occurring at the same time and happening the same place and time at which something is happening. So if you're performing a notarial act, that journal should be made at the same time as the performance of the notarial act, not a day later, not a week later, not 10 hours later, at that time. You're notarizing something with somebody in your presence, you're also creating that journal entry with that same person in your presence at the same time of that notarial act. The notary shall retain the journal for 10 years after the performance of the last notarial act. So a notary journal is really just your record of everything you've ever notarized. Everything you've ever notarized. Whether you notarize for the same person every day or different people every day, every time you notarize, you're making an entry in your journal for that notarial act. You're making it contemporaneously with the act, and you're keeping that journal for 10 years after the performance of the last notarial act that appears in that journal.
Like, that's a really good and important point, because I know that there are some notaries who have clients who come in to see them every single day. It's a different document, but come in to see them every single day. And they've asked the question, do I have to record every single one? Because I know that this client's going to be coming in tomorrow. And the answer is yes. Every single act must be recorded in the journal.
Yeah, we've, we get situations every now and then where everything's great today, right? And then, but a year from now or a couple months from now, not everything's great anymore. And all of a sudden we have a complaint about a notary. One of the favorite reasons, I know the person. I didn't put him in my journal. It's not a good reason. Journal entry for every notarial act, whether you know him or not, whether like Kathy said, if you see him every day, still need to make that journal entry every day that you notarize for them, making that journal entry. So documenting the notary journal, each notarial act must be documented in a separate journal entry, and each journal entry shall document the following things. Tell the date and time of the notarial act was performed. So what is it? Today is January 23rd. It's 10:47 a.m. My journal should have that. If I'm notarizing something right now, that's the date and time that should be recorded in that journal. Description of the record, if any, and type of notarial act. So what am I notarizing? What type of document is it? What type of notarial act am I performing? Again, we're going to have a whole town hall later this year about that. We have a recording from last year's about that, different types of notarial acts. So what document am I notarizing? What type of notarial act is it? Those are two different things. The record, what's on the document, might cover a subject, and the type of notarial act you're going to perform. Maybe it's an acknowledgement, maybe it's an oath, affirmation, official witness. Could be any of those and a little more. You're going to be putting that on there on the journal entry too. Full name and address of each individual for whom the notarial act is performed. So if I'm the notary, Kathy comes before me, I'm writing her name and address in the record in my journal. And say she brings a friend with her and I'm notarizing for both of them. I'm putting her information in there. I'm putting her friend's information in there. I'm identifying both of them and keeping a journal entry for both of them because I'm notarizing for both of them. So whoever you're notarizing for, that's who you need to have an entry in your journal for every time you notarize. If the identity of the individual is based on personal knowledge, a statement to that effect, which could just say personal knowledge, right? How'd you identify them? Personal knowledge. I know them. I know them. I know them sufficiently to establish their identity. That's how you have personal knowledge. I don't just see in passing, I know you. I've dealt with you enough to know your name, who you are, without having a look at your identification. If the identity of the individual is based on satisfactory evidence, give a description of the method of ID used. What identification credential was presented? Was it a driver's license? Was it a passport? Was it a non-driver ID? And again, earlier we talked about not using passports on your application. When you're a notary and you're out there actually notarizing, you can identify somebody using a passport. So you're going to make sure that you explain how you identified them. You're going to include the date of issuance and expiration of any of that ID that you're provided in your journal, and the ID number associated with that identification credential. Having that ID number is pretty darn good. You think about identifying somebody with a driver's license, and you identify them. Kathy comes before me. She presents her driver's license. I write all that information down on my journal. I'll note that I identified her using satisfactory evidence. I used the Maryland driver's license, issue date, expiration date, driver's license number. I mean, how many people on here don't actually chime in and answer, just asking for you to think about yourself, actually know your own driver's license number. I think it's a letter and 12 numbers. Most people don't know their full number. And so as a notary public, when you're logging that identification number in your journal, pretty good indicator that they appeared before you and you identified them. If they don't know their driver's license number and you do, well, it's because you looked at their ID. So good, strong evidence required, but good, strong evidence to verify that they came before you, you identified them for the purpose of notarizing. The fee charged, if any, by the notary. If no fee is charged by the notary, the record should indicate that no fee was charged. We'll talk about fees here shortly. And, the fees you're allowed to charge up to a certain amount per notarial act. But you don't have to charge anything. Many people notarize for free, and that's perfectly fine. Indicate whether an individual making a statement or executing a signature, which is the subject of the notarial act, appeared in the notary's physical presence or remotely by means of communication technology. What does that mean? Well, most folks are familiar with your traditional in-person notarial act. There is also notarial acts that can be done using communication technology. I'll call them remote notarial acts, remote notarizations. There's a town hall from November on our website, the recording that explains remote notarial acts, what they are and how they work. So if you're interested in remote notarial acts, check that out, sos.maryland.gov, click on notaries and find that town hall. And that'll explain remote notarial acts at a high level. What is it? How do you do it? And what are the rules about that?
Mike, just worth clarifying regarding identification methods. So a passport can be used to identify a person who presents a document to be notarized. That's different than using a passport for the application process. So please know, passports are not an acceptable form of identification when applying to become a notary, but they are an acceptable form of identification when identifying someone with a document to be notarized, because the passport does not contain your address, which is required for the application process. So just to make that distinction in case anybody has any questions or confusion.
So forms of notary journals. So a journal may be created on a tangible medium, i.e., on paper in book form or electronically. So notaries shall maintain only one journal to chronicle all notarial acts performed regarding tangible records. One journal if you're notarizing tangible records. So your traditional notarial acts, one journal to chronicle all those. One or more journals may be kept to chronicle all notarial acts performed regarding electronic records. Tangible medium journals must be in a permanent bound register with numbered pages. So focusing on the paper journal, the journal for traditional notarial acts done on paper with the person in front of you.
And they need to be in chronological order, right, Mike?
Correct.
So,
yep, that's exactly where I was going. Permanent bound register with numbered pages. You have to make your journal entry contemporaneously with the act, right? So they have to be in chronological order if you're doing that. If I notarized something yesterday, I should have made my journal entry at the time of the notarial act yesterday. If I notarized today, I'm going to make my my journal entry at the time of my notarial act today. So those entries should all be in chronological order because you're required to make that entry at the time of the notarial act. If they're not in chronological order, something's wrong in that journal. It means we're not making them at the right time or we're adding things in after the fact. So those journal entries should be chronological, and they should be placed in a permanent bound register with numbered pages. And again, that all further proves that it's chronological. You can't just be keeping stuff on loose leaf paper, shuffling pages in and out as it's convenient. It's got to be in a permanent book bound register with numbered pages. And those acts got to be kept contemporaneously made so that they're chronologically kept.
So Mike, when you talk about electronic journals, I know a lot of this has to do with remote notarizations, not exclusively, but with, so if somebody said, pardon me, if somebody says, so I want to keep an Excel file or a Word document, can you talk about what your response would be to that?
Well, I don't know what just happened, but I just moved a bunch of buttons. So the short answer is no. The electronic journals must also be a permanent tamper-evident electronic format that complies with the laws and any regs adopted by the Secretary of State. So there are more details in the law about electronic journals and tamper-evident format. But generally speaking, you can keep one or more journals for those electronic notarial acts because you're performing notarial acts on electronic records using remote notarization process.
Mhm.
And the approved vendors for those remote notarizations, generally one of the functions of their platform is that you have a record keeping mechanism as part of your technology on that platform.
Right.
And those technologies have tamper evident electronic formats that you can access that are secure, password protected. You enter their platform using your password and login info, and it's kept securely, not just a Word doc on a desktop or laptop that's floating around or that anybody could necessarily get into that's not protected. So tamper evident electronic format. And for electronic notarial acts, which are almost, not always, but almost always being performed on remote notarial act platforms, vendors, the vendor's going to have a journal as part of their feature for you, or a way to do that and keep it secure.
Thanks for clarifying that, Mike. I'm sure there are similar questions about that.
Right. Last section here, allowable fees. So notary public may demand and receive up to $6 for the performance of an original notarial act. This fee is a charge for each signature that a notary notarizes. So if I'm notarizing for two people are appearing before me. I've identified two people. Those two people have signed the document before me. Maybe it's an oath, maybe it's an acknowledgement, maybe it's an affirmation, maybe it's just an official witness. But all that occurs. I've done that for two folks. I'm completing two notary certificates, or one certificate with both individuals listed in it. $6 for person one, $6 for person two, $12 for two people. So $6 for notarial act. Remember, your notarial act is for the individual signing that record. More than one person might do that. So $6 for every signature that's being notarized. Additional copies of the same document, the notary may receive $3 for each signature notarized. So if, say I bring 3 of the exact same documents to the notary and they identify me, they watch me sign, $6 for the first one, 3 for every identical thing that I'm signing of that first original. So 6, 3, and 3 in that example I just gave. So $12 because it's the exact same document multiple times. A notary may not demand and receive more than $2 for each photocopy made of a notarial act if the notary is asked to make a photocopy of it at all. And a notary public may demand and receive reimbursement for traveling, mileage at the Internal Revenue Service rate for business travel, and a $5 fee, a fee not to exceed $5 for traveling. So if I'm traveling to notarize, I can charge $5 because I have to travel, plus mileage at the IRS rate, plus $6 for notarial act. So traveling is $5, up to $5 plus mileage. So you can charge up to a $5 fee because you have to go anywhere, plus the mileage, plus the notarial act. Notary public may not charge more than $25 for a remote notarial act. So if you're authorized to perform remote notarial acts, anybody that is authorized and uses remote online notary vendor technology to do remote notarizations knows that there is a cost of having and using that technology. So the fee for remote notarial act is now $25 per remote notarial act. So again, $25 per notarial act, which is per signer that you're notarizing for. Because all those folks that you're notarizing for remotely still had to go through that technology and meet the requirements before you could notarize for them. Again, if you want to know more about what our remote online notary vendors technology does, the remote notary town hall will talk about that in some detail. What features does it have to make sure the person appearing before you remotely using that communication technology is in fact the person that they claim to be.
So just to remind folks again that the fees went up. They have been $4 for a traditional notary, an in-person notarial act, and $4 for a remote notarization. So those went up to $6 respectively. And the fee for a photocopy also went up, as did additional copies. We've often gotten a question, well, what if somebody wants to give me a tip? Can I take a tip? The answer is no. No. These are the fees that you can charge, nothing else. This is what the law says. Okay. So no tips. Any fee that you charge, it's highly recommended that you record that in your journal so that there's absolutely no question about. And if you don't, there's no requirement to charge a fee. And if you choose not to charge a fee, I would recommend that you document that in the journal as well. So we'll have a whole session on remote notarizations later in the year, but and we did last year. So if you have questions regarding remote notarizations, check out our website from last year's town hall, and again, keep posted for the one we have this coming fall. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate that.
Yep, you got it. Yep, $6, right? What's that wording say? It says demand and receive up to $6. Can't demand more than $6 for traditional notarial act. Cannot receive more than $6. So, like Kathy said with the tip thing, cannot demand and receive. You cannot receive it. The max required in the law, $6 for traditional notarial acts, $25 for remotes.
Yeah, no exceptions. It doesn't make any difference if you're a lawyer or if you're a realtor, if you're a banker. This is what the law says. Okay?
And I'll add on to that a little bit more too, talking about tips, but also this is one of our most frequent type of asked questions at the end. People say, can I charge a fee for convenience? Nope. Can I charge a fee for? Nope. If the only fees you can charge for notarial acts are the ones outlined in the law and in the regs, and it doesn't matter what you want to call those additional fees you want to tack on. The answer is no. Cannot do it. $6 for act, $3 in that situation, $2 for photocopies, $5 to travel plus mileage, $25 for remotes. Those are the fees you can charge. No convenience fees, after-hour fees. What if it's at 2 in the morning? Nope, no additional fees. These are the fees you can charge. These are the fees. There are no other fees.
And we share this with you so that you can succeed. We want to make sure you don't get yourself in hot water.
Exactly. So in review of this last section here, the Secretary of State does not provide notaries with their own notary seal. The notaries must purchase their own seal. Your employer might buy it for you. That's great. But if the notary leaves their employer, the notary, not the employer, keeps their notary seal. The notary seal must contain the name as it appears on the notary's commission, the words notary public, and the jurisdiction in which the notary was appointed. So whether that's one of our counties or Baltimore City, it needs to say that. So wherever you're sworn in, that's the jurisdiction that shows up on your notary seal. A notary's journal must contain a record of every notarial act performed, even if the notary knows the person signing the documents, all that information for every notarial act. That's what it needs to have. Law established the fee a notary can charge right now, max of $6 for traditional notarial acts, $25 for remote notarial act. So that is those are the fees at this point in time today. The law allows the Secretary of State to set the fees by regulation, so that is what they are set at this point in time. So some upcoming town halls, just for folks to be aware about, notaries public versus title insurance producers and independent contractors. What's the difference? So it's a frequent topic. Folks ask a lot of questions about title insurance producers. It's outside the scope of our authority. We can't answer those questions. So tune into that town hall coming up next month. Hopefully a lot of that will be answered, but you'll at least have the opportunity to ask the folks that handle title insurance producers, which is the Maryland Insurance Administration, on that town hall as well. So that'll be a good one. Notary handbook, law and regulations and overview, types of notarizations, how to avoid complaints, remote notarizations, and what is an apostille, and you know what's the relation to notaries really. All these upcoming town halls coming up later this year on the schedule. And pointing out as well that every town, about a week in advance of the town hall, you'll get an email with the link for that town hall. So the link we're using today is not going to be the same link for the next town hall or any of these town halls. There's a new link for every town hall, and that'll go out in that email invitation about a week in advance of each of these town halls. So be on the lookout. You'll get an email in February about the February 21st town hall. with that link and that information, and same format, same all of the stuff. Google Meet, no advanced registration, first 500 to join, get in. Otherwise, it's recorded and posted online. Same plan for all these town halls.
Thanks, Mike, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. I hope this town hall was helpful and informative. If you have a topic that you'd like us to consider, please feel free to drop it in the chat box. If it is within the scope of our authority and if we have the capacity, we'll be happy to consider it. Again, the recording from today's town hall will be posted on the Office of the Secretary of State's webpage, the Notary webpage. Please feel free to refer to it as often as you like. A final reminder that the content and presentation presented today is for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be legal advice. Carrie Ann, I think you may have some questions that were presented. If you do,
I do. So the first question I have is from Dawn. She wants to know, how come when you go back to the recordings of the she can't see the Q&A portions of our town halls?
Yes, some of the information that's in the Q&A portion is really proprietary. Individuals are asking questions specific to their circumstances, and that's not for public consumption. The town hall itself is for public consumption.
Dawn also made a suggestion. She feels as though the vendors should be required to spell out what's involved in the course. She had to ask multiple questions. She basically wants to know, how long it is, how long it takes the time out when you're doing the course. She feels as though a little bit more information should be offered up about the vendors.
Thanks for sharing the comment, Carrie Ann.
Okay. Harriet wants to know, has your office considered using ID that proves we have been sworn in and received our commission? Like a photo ID that says they're a notary public.
Yeah. I mean,
Not to my knowledge, we haven't. Frankly, that would likely pose an administrative burden that we're not prepared to accept at this point.
and
There's no reason you have
costs.
a commission. You have a commission that you can take with you. You have a commission that you can frame. So that's your verification that you have been commissioned as and are in good standing. Folks can also check our website to verify that a notary is in good standing. So there are many ways for the public to be able to verify that a notary is in good standing. Okay, thank you. Next question, if there is one.
This one's from unknown. How far in advance of the renewal should we sign up for the course of study? Does the completion have to be within the 60-day renewal window?
Yeah, we tell folks, take the course within that renewal window. If you took it right before your 60-day window, that's going to be okay. But take it during that renewal window, 60 days before you expire, 30 days after you expire. That ensures.
Just repeating again that the course of study is required for all notaries who are either new applicants and renewal applicants. The exam is required for all new notary applicants. So, for example, I'm a brand new applicant. I've got to take the course of study, and I take an exam. I'm a renewing applicant, but I missed my commissioning date, and I now need to apply as a new notary because I failed to pick up my commission. I need to take the course of study and the exam, both. Okay, so those are the circumstances there. Any other questions in there before we have a few hands raised?
I have a couple more.
Sure.
This one just wants to know, how long does it take to get the handbook? And can they shadow other notaries once they're commissioned?
So how long to take the handbook? Mike, I'm not sure if we have an exact time frame on that because you need to apply for it online now, make your payment, and then the Division of State Documents issues that handbook to us. So that's outside of the scope of our office, but I would imagine it's within a week or two, if not sooner. It would be my guess, but you can contact the Division of State Documents and they would be happy to provide you that information.
different division that
Yep.
actually sells that handbook in our office. So yeah, check with them on that one.
Tawana wants to know, she took the class at PG County, and she was advised, when advertising your business, specific verbiage is required on the flyer, business cards, Lincoln,
Mhm.
and any written acknowledgement. Please specify.
So please specify what is required
Yeah.
when advertising.
Yeah, we don't regulate the advertising of a notary. We regulate the other matters that have been discussed during this town hall.
There is a phrase, I'm going to look it up here real quick, that they're supposed to put on there when advertising, though, that they are supposed to disclose.
Okay, if you'll get that, and then
Yeah, I'll
put that in the chat box, please, Mike.
Yep, will do.
Thanks so much.
And Barbara Berry wants to know, if you notarize infrequently and your logbook had entries over 10 years, can you remove the expired pages from the logbook?
No.
Yeah, the logbook needs to be untampered, needs to be intact.
Here's one. If you're notarizing a set of estate planning documents for a client, do you need a separate entry for each document?
So per Remote Notarial Act, should be the standard. If you were to list, if you notarize for me 2 different documents and you were to list them on the same line in your journal, that would be sufficient. But ideally, separate entry each time. That way, you're spelling out your details differently. On one document, it may be, document A, and it may be an acknowledgement. The next notarization, document B, may be maybe an oath or affirmation you're administering, and that could get pretty jumbled pretty quickly if you try to combine them all into one. But yeah, that's the answer.
Only 2 left. This one's actually, I like this one. If there's a person with a foreign identification, can we accept it?
So let me go and read the wording right out of the law here. I'm looking up the other advertising information here. But notary must be have satisfactory evidence of the identification of somebody. And give me one sec. So government issued satisfactory evidence of the identity of the individual by means of a passport, driver's license, consular identification, or government issued non-driver identification card, or another form of government identification issued to the individual that contains the signature and photograph of the individual and is satisfactory to the notarial officer. I think that last part there covers that scenario. Another form of government identification issued to the individual that contains the signature and photograph of the individual and is satisfactory to the notarial officer. So it leaves the notary a little leeway there to decide if they believe that this is satisfactory identification, if it's outside of the standard passport, driver's license, consular ID, government issued non-driver identification card.
And the very last question is this something we have to claim on our taxes as income?
You would need to refer to your tax accountant for that information. Okay, thanks, Carrie Ann. We have a couple of hands that are raised. Mary Gennard, are you still on the line? And if so, we're happy to hear your question.
And FYI, I just threw that wording about advertising in that chat box for those who are have a hard time finding the chat box. If a notary public who is not a licensed attorney to practice law in the state advertises or represents that the notary public offers notarial services, whether orally or in a record, including broadcast media, print media, and the internet, the notary public shall include the following statement set forth in State Government Article 18-224 D2, and that must say, I am not an attorney licensed to practice law in the state. I am not allowed to draft legal records, give advice on legal matters, including immigration, or charge a fee for those activities.
Great. Thanks for finding that, Mike.
Sorry, thanks.
All right, one more time. Mary Denard, are you still on the call? And if so, please unmute yourself, and we're happy to hear your question. Mary Denard going once, going twice. You may have left the call. Okay, Jody Baum, you have a question for us?
I do. Thank you so much. The question I have is, if I leave my employer, but my notary is still in place, the commission is still in place, can I still perform notarial acts?
Yes, you can.
Yes, absolutely. Remembering it's your commission, you are the notary, not the employer. So everything is tied to you and you individually. So your commission carries on, whether you're there or not. Come and go, change job 3 times. It's still following you, the individual.
Right.
Thank you. Very helpful.
Good question. Thank you. Steve Fulcrum, you have a question?
Yeah, my question is on keeping the documents for 10 years. Some of us are getting a little older. And so at some point, if I, as the notary, pass away, what does my wife do with the notary book that I have of all my documents, of all the notary work that I've done?
It's a great question. It's actually addressed in our law. Mike, you want to fill this one?
So in that scenario, you said it would, what would your wife do with it? Your wife would keep it for the 10 years. So basically the law just explains that if the notary keeps it, and if the notary is incapacitated or otherwise can't keep it, that whoever is really, I'll paraphrase really, but whoever is next of kin, next in line for that person's property would be the one tasked with maintaining it. I don't know of any off the top of my head, but a notary could store their journal with some type of third-party entity, and as long as the notary has a written agreement with that entity, then they would qualify as a repository that could store the notary's information. So there is but I don't know of any companies off the top of my head that do that. I'm sure they're out there though, where you could enter an agreement where they could store your information, and as long as you have that agreement, then they would be satisfactory. Or on the death or adjudication of the competency of a former or current notary public, the notary public's personal representative or guardian or any other person knowingly in possession of the journal shall transmit it to a repository approved by the Secretary of State. So either they keep it or they transmit it to a repository, which we don't have a list of approved repositories. Nobody's reached out and said, hey, I want to be an approved repository. So what could you do in that case if you wanted to have a repository? You just have a written agreement with whoever that repository is going to be that they're going to keep that for the required time frame. That's all, spelled out in the law.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Great question.
Han Zhang,
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for your time. My question is, I will renew my notary public next year, July 2024. If I take the notary public course and got my certificate today, when I renew my notary public next year, July, can I still use the certificate?
I would really recommend that you take the course of study much closer, within the 60 days prior to your renewal.
Right. Yeah. During or right before that renewal window, not a year in advance,
Yeah.
not a year and a half in advance. The law has changed a whole lot in the last 2.5 years. If you took a class a year ago, the law is slightly different than what it was a year ago.
Mhm.
If you took it 2 years ago, the law is still more different. 3 years ago, completely different. So
Yeah.
take it right around that renewal window, during or right before, not a year in advance, or not even 4 or 5 months in advance. Take it right there during that window, or just at the beginning of that window.
And I know I've shared it several times throughout this town hall, but the recording of today's town hall will be available on the Office of Secretary of State's website under the notary tab. So if anyone wants to refer to the content, that's where you can find it. Okay. Barbara Berry, you have your hand up.
Yes, I was asked the previous question about the log. So my follow-up to that question is, since it's so infrequent, can I start a new logbook prior to filling the old logbook?
They need to be in chronological order, Miss Berry.
Right, but do all the pages have to be filled? If I end with one date on, like, with only like halfway filled and start a new the logbook with the next date?
But yeah, I mean, you should fill the logbook, I guess. I don't know if
Right.
maybe is your logbook like damaged or the page is old or something like that.
It's getting old. It goes back to like 2014 and I'm probably only halfway filled.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if you're getting to a point where the book is damaged and you're worried about your records getting damaged, you start a new book, keep that old book for the 10 years. But generally, you should fill your book and move to the next book. But yeah, I mean, if there's a reason outside of the usual practice, then yeah, get a new book and start keeping it chronologically there.
Okay.
And maintain the previous one so you
Yeah,
have,
maintain the previous one for the length of time.
Okay. Thank you.
of course. Q Cooper.
Good morning. My question is, well, let me start off like this first. The vendor that my company uses records online journal entries for us. Do I still need to place that inside of my physical journal that I have?
No, and yeah, I'll slide back real quick to the slide that we talk about this on a little bit, just to serve as a little reference point. You have your traditional journal, your hard copy paper journal for your traditional notarial acts. You can have one or more journals to chronicle your electronic records. So all your remote notarizations are all on electronic records, right? So your Ron vendor has that journal and records that and keeps that. So that's an electronic journal sufficient for those electronic records that you've notarized. You don't have to then double up and put them in your paper journal. You have them electronically. And you can have a separate electronic journal for those electronic records. And one of the motivating factors in why you can have one or more electronic journals is, you said you have one technology your company uses. Well, maybe they use two or three. So you want to have, and every Ron vendor is going to have a journal feature on their platform. So you're going to have a journal for when you're using electronic records on one vendor versus another vendor. Whereas in your traditional paper notarial acts, you're the one keeping that paper log bound together. And so you're having one for your traditional notarizations on paper, a paper form journal and a book form. And for electronic records, it can be a separate journal. And if you're keeping it there, you could have one or more electronic journals, which, like I said, usually depends on how many different remote technologies you use when notarizing. So you don't have to double up on that entry, once on electronic and once on paper.
Thanks, Mike. Sharon Clifford.
Yeah, I have one quick question. In my journal, I know you said it has to be in chronological. However, in doing a notary, I flipped the page and 2 pages got stuck together. So do I leave those pages blank or do I go back in and fill them?
Well, I can't give you legal advice, but I would just say maybe it's best to just note on those 2 pages what happened, right? You got a chronological, those 2 pages are skipped. If you start going back to fill those pages out, now you're going out of chronological order, right?
I kind of did.
Yeah. So yeah. Don't move it forward. Yeah.
Okay.
It makes it look like you're back.
So I think Mike is right. We're not providing legal advice. You may want to consult counsel for that. But it would seem to me that putting a note in there saying pages got stuck together and then continuing from there forward in chronological order would.
That was exactly what I was going to say. Make the note, move forward. And accidents happen. So that happens. And if that ever happens, note those pages and then carry on.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Maria B., your hand is up.
Hi, I have a quick question. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Great. My commission ends in August. and my book is almost full. Is it okay if I create an Excel with the same formats as the book and just keep a journal until August and then add that to my book once I'm done?
No, it's got to be bound, numbered pages. The traditional notarial acts have to be entered in chronological order and have to be a part of that bound, numbered page book. You don't have to have, like, if you were to fill your book up before your commission ends, you just get another book and start filling it out. You don't have to have a separate book for every commission.
Okay. So I
Yeah.
remember, I think in the last town hall meeting or something about you could do it within, you keep the log, but it could be like a Excel. Somebody said Excel, and then you could, as long as you have the same formats as the book, to be able to enter the entry. I thought I heard something about you could do that and then add it to your book if your book was getting close to full. But I wanted to double check before.
So I think this is part of the problem. This is why we ask our participants not to respond to questions that are asked in the chat box, because
Agreed.
I think sometimes people who are well-intended
Yeah.
provide information that is not accurate, inadvertently, but nonetheless.
Okay.
So I think you've got the correct information from Mike now, so I think guidance is just to use that information from Mike.
Yeah,
Great.
the
So I
key-
will purchase another book.
Yeah,
Good,
the
okay.
key on those books are bound, numbered page books.
Mhm.
And fill them out, fill them up, move on to the next one. If you start slipping in loose pages, or you keep it on your computer, then you print them and throw them into the book, they're no longer bound, numbered pages, and that's where we kind of run out of that particular requirement of law, even like with good intentions, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, good question though. Good question.
Great. Understood. Thank you very much for your
Okay.
clarification. I appreciate it. Happy New Year.
Same to you.
Thank you. And then there was a question about how long the online course is. That really depends upon the vendor and also upon the person taking the course of study. Some folks go through that more quickly than others, and so you may want to contact the vendor that you select and get some information from them specific to that. There was a question also about the stamping device and the journal and how to order them. We do not give advice or recommendations about where or when or how to make that purchase. There are many options available, and you can choose the one as long as they meet the requirements set forth in the law.
Yeah, think about office supply type of stores. Oftentimes they will, you can purchase your notary stamp or journal from them.
And so Sylvia Cesar, I don't know if you're still on, you have a question in here. To have all the information about today, it's town hall, what do I have to do? Just go on our website in a few days and the town hall will be uploaded. You can hear the recording again. I think that's the question you're answering, but if not, I'll give you a moment to come off mute and ask the question you asked. And the recording is available. The PowerPoint is contained in the recording. It is not being provided separately. So Sylvia, if you're on the call, you're welcome to come off mute and ask your question if it wasn't answered. Okay, well, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. That's it for us. We're grateful you joined us. Hope this was helpful. We look forward to seeing you at a future town. Yep. I'm sorry?
I said,
Yes,
yes,
thank
it
you.
was. Thank you so much.
Oh, good. You're welcome. Well, have a great day, everybody. Be safe.
Thank
Take good
you.
care.
Thank
Okay.
you. Have a good day.
Bye-bye. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Catherine.
My
You're
pleasure.
welcome. Thank you.
Take good care. My pleasure.